of thing. We wanted to keep the flavor of the hero quite a bit with those tabs and that sort of stuff, so that kind of works.
But put a tool in the kit there for when she's
Exactly, right? It's a very, very, very targeted tool for very specific situations. The other thing to note is that this animation right now is placeholder. It is not the final animation. The animation team is super hard at work into making it look even better. So we can get feedback on this if you want, but it'll change.
I think a few people in chat have mentioned it already.
Yeah,
so
probably.
Don't worry.
Yeah, so let me do it again here. So yeah, get this.
It'll be different.
It'll be different. Don't worry about it, right? So a couple of other changes to Peacekeeper as well. So it's going to be a bit hard here to show it, but we've also adjusted the trajectories. They detect the weapon trajectories of her side heavies. So because of this now, like these attacks hit further out, a little bit flatter. So she's going to be able to defend herself better when she's outnumbered. Again, same thing as we had with Hitokiri, like when we talked about just earlier, where having those slightly larger trajectories really helps in keeping opponents off of you.
That makes sense. She's got an arming sword.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that kind of makes sense there.
Yeah.
So that's great. Another thing that we've done, I don't know if you remember, way back when, we did a change.
The time before time.
The time before time, right?
Yeah.
Where we changed the input on her deflect attack, right?
Right.
It used to be on light, and we put it on heavy. And the reasoning was, well, you kind of had the option select, like do like light heavy whenever you did a dodge to make sure it would land, you would go into it. And it felt kind of like a bit odd. But then looking back at it, like we've been looking back at it, we've been wanting to do this for a while, because it's an attack that bleeds, all of her attacks that bleed come from her dagger. Her dagger is always on the light attack button. So we've actually reverted this, and now it's back onto the light button input. I know a certain Frozen person that's probably in chat right now that is ecstatic about this change.
Everybody's favorite Bond villain's jumping up and down right now.
So that's great. So we did that change. It's going to be awesome. It really it feels better with the character as well. It makes it's a lot more in line with what she does. So that's pretty.
That makes sense. Why? It's one of a list of reasons why I'm trash with PK. Because I could never get the deflect thing.
Next up, we have zone attack. So zone attack, we've lowered the cost of the initial hit. It used to cost 40, then 10. Now it costs 20 plus 10. So again, stamina economy. You
love
can use
to
zone
see.
attack. Yeah, it's always
stamina
good.
in this economy.
Yeah, right. How does that work? Okay, so that's there. Again, you'll be able to use your zone attack a lot more often. Really good part of her mix-up as well. The second hit is unblockable when you're bleeding. So again, adds a lot of pressure. Super cool. And then finally, with Peacekeeper, the last thing we've done is we've removed the strict input requirements on her stabs when she guard breaks and on deep gouge. So for example here, right? I'm not that good at the time these or whatever. Now I can just go mash.
Nice.
Right? And it works, no problem. Same for deep gouge, right? I can mash it and it's going to come out. Before, if you mashed it, it really didn't come out. It's good because it's a lot easier to input, but at the same time, if you still want to do, stab into a throw, for example, right? You can do throwing.
Nice.
If you mash it, your third stab is going to come out. So you still have to have a bit more of the input, the clean of I'm going to do tap and doing it.
Gotcha.
But at least it makes it a lot more accessible to just mash it.
You don't have to have the timing specific, but it's not going to let you throw in 8 inputs to light and then still follow up with your kick.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So that's the important.
So you still have to get the number right.
Yeah.
You just don't have to also 50-pound brain it.
Yeah. Well, it's the same we did with Shinobi, right? Shinobi has the same type of thing when you do sickle rain, where we remove the input, the strict input requirements for doing those stabs. But at the same time, if you want to do stab into backflip because you get better frame advantage, for example, you still have to do it consciously and not just smash and then try to do something, right? Happens to me all the time. So I'm well aware of how bad I am at this. So that's kind of good there.
I still won't be able to do it.
Right.
Something fell.
Something fell. Doesn't matter. Yeah. So that's it for Peacekeeper. So now let's go look at Medjay.
Medjay,
right?
let's go.
Is a super cool hero. A lot of people love him.
Yeah,
I love
the
Medjay.
white boy.
Yeah, right. The white boy. There's something that I think a lot of people have been requesting for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you remember when we launched? Even people I wish I could switch modes constantly in the middle of a fight because I don't like having to do back in guard break to switch, and I'm kind of stuck and I can't do anything.
Yeah, huge point of feedback. I want to be able to just
exactly right
between modes.
I mean, that would be nice.
So now, Medjay has a new move that is accessible from either staff mode or axe mode, which is performed with zone attack. So after any attack that Medjay does, if you do zone attack, you switch modes.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Right?
Nice.
It counts as a heavy. So if I go into a heavy afterwards, like if I go into back into staff mode, I go heavy, zone into a heavy, I go into my heavy finisher.
Wow.
If I go going into light, I go into my chain lights, right? So it really counts as a heavy. So your next heavy that you perform, like if you do another heavy right after that zone attack, is going to be the one with the special properties.
Okay.
So in staff, is going to be like with the uninterval stance. If you're in axe, it's going to be the unblockable one.
Take a look.
That's kind of like the idea here. We really wanted to make sure that you had that flow. And also what's kind of cool is you can go and zone into zone, constantly switch as much as you want.
Rafflecopter.
Wow.
Right?
Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh,
You can go kind of nuts, but that's kind of interesting, right? So you can, it really adds a lot to this flow and really go into, you can go ham in what you want to do, but it's also super variable.
Nice. Medjay main's eaten today.
That is,
on top of this, we've also removed the armor, the uninterval stance on staff mode, chain lights and chain light finishers. Mostly because we want to make sure that Medjay has, when you're in staff mode, like it's super strong, right? You have like those big trajectories, and you had that uninterval stance constantly, and so it made the hero super difficult to peel when and Medjay didn't really have to think. You just did like light heavy, light heavy, light heavy. You didn't really care, but now because of this, you need to be smarter into how you play and be more aware of what's going on around you, because you will be peeled if you use your light attacks. Like most players are going to be able to be good enough to hit you right in those in between those little timings, so that you have to be a lot more conscious as to what you're going to be doing. So it's a bit of a nerf here, but it's I think a well-deserved nerf.
Yeah.
Like staff mode has been like overperforming for a while, so that was kind of necessary. And last but not least, the light finisher in axe mode is now undodgeable, right? So you can see the little blue spark here. So the idea here is that when you do a bash into a light, right? So that's cool. That kind of works.
They usually dodge right after.
But then you had a situation where your opponent could just mash dodge, get out of your light and your heavy, right? You chain heavy or your light finisher.
Yeah,
and so we had
really annoying. For
right, it's super annoying, right? Because then the offense that the hero has was not as strong as it should have been. And so we had to choose between putting undodgeable on the light finisher or on the chain heavy. And we decided to put it on the light finisher because we really wanted to keep that identity of the hero of when you're in axe mode, when you do heavies, the only property you really get is unblockable at the end. And it became like super rainbow, like, like Christmas tree-ish, even though it's kind of the season. But like you would get blue into orange and getting all those kind of crazy things. So instead we put it on light finishers. It also emphasizes the fact that as a Medjay, if you do this, right, light, we're back to neutral. I'm frame disadvantage. I still have to reopen up my opponents. I still have to get into it. But I did get damage. I did beat their bash. I did their dodge. I did beat the dodge with a very, very good option as well. It's hard to, it's not super easy for everybody to react to, even though they're 500 MS lights. You still have to kind of know what you're doing. The heavies still work. Heavy feint to guard break, heavy feint to parry still works. All that sort of stuff works. But I really want to make sure that you had that option now. So you have more guaranteed damage. You're scared. Your opponent's going to be scared of dodging. And if they're scared of dodging, it means your heavies are probably going to land more if they're blocked. Then if they're blocked, you get access to your finisher. All those kind of things that kind of like fall into place a lot better for the hero. So that's the idea here for Medjay.
Kind of the TLDR should feel a lot better to play, a lot more fluid, but a little easier to crack.
Exactly,
right. And solve like, some of those like pain points of like, fighting against Medjay.
Exactly, right. So that's the big thing here. And I love that like now you can go that into an unblockable and get like that super cool flow. It's amazing. So can't wait for players to try that out.
Yeah, I cannot wait.
All right, so that's it for Medjay.
PK and Medjay, and then Highlander so, 2.0. Let's see what they've done.
We've done Highlander testing grounds in the past, and it was received, right? We talked about it before. There's a lot of good stuff, and there's some things that we've received a lot of feedback about that players weren't super happy about, which is totally understandable.
Yeah.
So what we've done with Highlander is we decided to do a second pass, address the more problematic parts of what we had in the first testing grounds, but at the same time, keep a lot, because everything that kind of worked.
Oh, they should have had the hero skin on them.
Because it still made sense, right? So what we're going to be talking about right now, what I'm going to be like explaining, is if I don't talk about it, is the same as it was in the first testing round.
So if we don't mention it today, it means we didn't touch it.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So first off, we have offensive form. So when you're in offensive form, we had side dodge caber toss, right? That we were like, yeah, it's kind of cool, you know, it kind of feels good. But at the same time, it was kind of problematic because it unbalances, because it it had too many issues, right? You would unbalance somebody, so you got your guaranteed heavy afterwards, which is, you know, what kind of Highlander was kind of about on live right now. But at the same time, because it unbalances people, you had allies that can go and just go, somebody's on the ground, let's, you know, hit them for all we've got constantly. If you had a Yorm or a Centurion nearby, it's like, well, guess what? You're dead.
Yeah, you're gonna jump.
So what is it,
off of a defensive maneuver, which is not something that we really wanted to have. So instead what we've done is we've added a new side dodge attack, which is on heavy. So if you side dodge when you release heavy, you go into a dodge attack. Right now we put animation
go right back
of
in.
the defensive form side dodge attack. This is also placeholder.
Yep.
It's getting reworked. It's similar-ish because we still want to have like trajectories and stuff, and we still be able to hit people externally. But at the same time, like it's a lot safer. It lets us balance the damage of it as well quite well, because it's on a heavy, it can execute, so that's kind of good. But it doesn't need to deal like upwards, like close to 30 damage, just because you managed to do a side dodge and got into something. So that's like one of the big changes we've done here.
And for the animation hawks in chat, just to make sure everyone heard it, placeholder animation.
Yeah, placeholder, right? This is the exact same animation as we have on defensive form, rather. Sorry. But it is getting changed. So that's that's good. I saw like a prototype of it this morning.
Yeah, nice.
It also kind of fast holds back into offensive stance as much as you want. You can go into like if you don't do anything, you go into defensive. So it's all the usual stuff that we have, but really to have that aspect of a side dodge attack here, as iframes, all the good stuff, so you're able to like defend yourself properly.
Nice.
With this, we still kept caber toss on front dodge, right? But we have removed the change we had done. We reverted it.
We got a lot of feedback.
Yeah, we got a lot of feedback on this where like we sped it up, right? We had sped it up because it was landing much more often.
So
getting
so
stuck
fast
in that animation constantly didn't feel super good. So we've reverted it. So now it's back to the timing we had before, right? So you grab him, Highlander lovingly looks into your eyes before he chucks you down. So that's one of the feedback we've got. Like I remember seeing that feedback a ton from people.
Yeah, we saw feedback on both sides. Both like it doesn't feel good to be in this all the time, and also from Highlander mains saying, like I miss that moment of like gotcha.
Yeah, right. So we reverted that specifically to make sure that we were good for this. Another change that we've done is that top light in offensive stance is 400 ms. It used to be 5, so now it's 4. So you have that 400 ms into every single stance now. That's great. It's, you know, very, very good unreactable offense. It's enhanced, right? So
yes,
like, well,
I love the pommel bonk every time. It doesn't
cool,
matter,
right?
Any hero, any game, the thunk.
Yeah, that's great. Next up, we have zone attack. So it's kind of hard to show right now, but we've adjusted the weapon trajectories on his zone attack as well, so that you were able to hit minions and opponents more reliably externally. There was some issues with it that we actually managed to resolve, so it should be a lot more reliable at hitting people outside. I know I had a lot of players send me videos of I'm doing zone attacks and then the sword
and it's just swooshing through
like minions and stuff, so that should be all fixed right now. And then the last change that we've done might be a little bit hard to show, but basically we want Highlander to be able to enter offensive form a little bit easier, right? And have less risk to do it. So we still have the I throw a heavy, I feint into offensive stance. That's great. But then from neutral, if you hold heavy, you go into it, but it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And so at higher levels, at most levels actually, if you see a Highlander doing this, you could just light them out of it every single time. You see him enter, you light it, right? That's why those backstep lights were necessary, because you had to backstep into offensive stance.
Yeah.
So you would be safer.
Otherwise, every Nobu on the planet's going to boop.
Exactly. So what we've done is something a little bit tricky, where you can now cancel the entry of offensive form from neutral 266 ms earlier. You can do it into a dodge. So normally if you look at the time it takes for me to like go heavy and then before I'm in, or I can do whole and then dodge a little bit earlier.
Okay.
And so
nice.
from our testing internally, from what we've been looking at, it means that your opponents can no longer just randomly throw a light when they see you enter it, because you can go
light option
dodge into it's like a dodge into a side dodge attack, for example, and you're gonna beat their light, their recovery, everything there. So it should make entering offensive form from neutral also safer here, right? It's still a read. If you don't want to dodge, then your opponents have to do something else, but they can still guard break you. But if they try to guard break you, you can just go into this and they're kind of screwed. So you still have options in these situations, but it lets you go into it a little bit safer even when you're closer, so your opponents can't just light you out of it constantly.
Well, it still maintains that like highly technical.
Yeah, of course, right?
Highlander.
Yeah, because if I want to go into like this, right, I have to go dodge, do it. So it's tricky, like the holding, not holding, mashing, dodge, get into it. So we still want to have that feeling of the inputs are tricky on Highlander. You have to use like your giant brain to be able to like and there's a lot of muscle memory involved in it, right? So that you go, I have to hold, not hold, and like get into those moments. But it again, it's one of those things that we're comfortable giving Highlander slightly more complicated inputs because you have those higher reward situations. And we really want to make sure that Highlander had those options to get into offensive form and really be able to go from defensive to offensive to defensive to offensive. Kind of like what we have with Medjay, right? Where you have those two modes, except going into them with Highlander is a lot more complex because you have to hold, you have to do all these crazy things.
Yeah. Well, I mean,